Thank you. So to start off our gathering in a good way today, we invited Mary Macleod to join us. Mary Macleod is of the Crane clan and is an Ojibwe Anishinaabe from Nipissing First Nation. Mary Macleod's spirit name is Enzo Kid, which means storyteller in Anishinaabe. He is a helper Shkabewis of the Anishinaabe Nation Eagle Staff and Bundle. He is also a recognized traditional helper, Shkabewis, and pipe carrier. He is the manager and cultural services of the Nee Johnsononic Child and Family Services, and he is an elder helper resource person and continues to extend his knowledge on traditional medicine teachings, ceremonies, and by facilitating workshops. Please welcome Mary Macleod Shabagishik.
Wow. Bonjour. Enzo Kadishnika, Shage Dodem Bising Donjaba, and Shnabe and Dao. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me here to be a part of this really important virtual gathering, talking circle, sharing circle, because it is about our language. And what I'd like to do just before we begin is acknowledge the place where I'm from. The place of the Nipissings on the shores of Lake Nipissing in Ontario, Northern Ontario. And I lit this fire here for today, for us, and for our ancestors, for the spirits that help us. And before we begin, I would like just to take a few moments to do a Sama tobacco offering on your behalf. What I'd like to do is to offer this Sama, to open my hand, and have each of you send your thoughts to this sama, to this tobacco. It could be a thank you, it could be a request, it could be for someone else who is going through some hard times. It could be for those little ones that are being found as we speak, those ones who were lost in that residential school journey. Whatever it is, you can send it to this sama, this tobacco that I hold here. I will keep my hand open for a few moments in silence, and let you send this to me so I can offer that on your behalf. Oh. Oh. I'd like to take this time, this little bit of time, just to share a little bit about this gathering here today, this time we're spending together. Time is the most precious gift we can share, so it's no small thing to come together and to offer that up to each other, to share our thoughts, our words. One of the teachings I've received and the understanding I've come to is that our words have medicine in them. Our words carry medicine, how we use it, how we interact with each other, when we speak to each other, when we text each other, how words carry medicine. People receiving those words will respond to them in whatever medicine is in them. And today we need to be careful Well, we always need to be careful on our words. But one of the things about our Indigenous languages is the medicine that was carried in that language is pure of heart. Each word itself has special medicine in it. Each word is a story. So when we tell our stories in the language, they are stories within stories. Our words, when you break them down, have a journey. And when you understand the language, that language takes you into the story and into every word that is shared. The importance of revitalizing our language is not just about keeping a language alive. It's about keeping our spirit alive, the people, all the people. Even though we come from different Indigenous backgrounds and places, all of our language, be them different, are still the same. They all carry that same spirit. They carry our understanding of creation, our worldview, the way we see the world and the way we see ourselves in that world. The importance of the language cannot be spoken enough. And so this time we're spending here today to talk about our languages, and the importance of it, and that work that we need to do to preserve it, to pass it on. Our children are asking for this. We must do this. So this project is a part of that work that is being done. And I thank the organizers for not just inviting me, but for this project, for this work that is being done by all of our people across the land, across Turtle Island. I say chimigwech to you. Nahau.
Chimigwech, Harry, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. It's always nice to hear you speak. And you always set things off in a good way for us. So chimigwech again.
No.
I would like to quickly introduce our moderators for today's gathering. To start off, I just quickly introduce myself. My name is Natalie Wajashkwastul. I'm a Anishinaabe Kwe from Oki-Kinda Anishinaabeg, known as Doki's First Nation here in Ontario, and I'm a member of the Eagle Clan. I am happy to be a part of this online event today. Also, our second moderator is Patty Shabard, the National Manager, Indigenous Relations at Mitacs, and will offer a brief overview of the webinar and introduce our speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Natalie, and thank you, Perry. I agree, really appreciate hearing you speak and opening up this opportunity and gathering in a good way. As Natalie had said, I am the National Manager of Indigenous Relations here at Mitacs. My family is Algonquin from Kippawa, a small community in Northern Ontario. As you may know, this webinar is the first in a series of webinars that will profile work coming out of the Indigenous Pathways Research and Innovation Call. Our goal is to celebrate the work of Indigenous researchers, innovators, and communities, and continue to carve out space for the important and exciting work happening across Turtle Island and beyond. Our gathering today explores the Sanyakola Language Revitalization project. The project shares a model for the reclamation of endangered Indigenous languages rooted in land-based settings. Speakers today will address designing and launching Indigenous community-driven research through the Pathways Call, the significance of Indigenous and place-based pedagogy in this work, and touch on immersive technologies in the reclamation and resurgence of Indigenous languages. And I am sure so much more. I am thankful for the opportunity to introduce our speakers today. I will offer a brief introduction for each speaker, and then we'll invite each speaker to introduce themselves. Sarah Child has worked in education for most of her life. She is a professor of Indigenous education at North Island College and is leading the Sanyakola Language Revitalization project, overseeing a number of Indigenous learners and community-based researchers for this project alone. She strives to provide language learning, capacity, and long-term employment opportunities for youth and adults to create pathways towards fluency and healing. Her grandparents and mother are her inspiration, as are her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. I welcome Sarah to introduce herself.
Kayla Kessler, Nugo completely Nuk, Jayutlanaktakis, Jayutlanakukos Yatlawadnigedzi. My name is Cleatly Nu. I welcome the people. I come from a house of my grandfather, the late Chief Tommy Hunt, and I work for North Island College and also in my community trying to support language revitalization for Kwakwaka'wakw. Kayla Kessler.
Thank you, Sarah. Carolyn Runningwell is dedicated to supporting Indigenous language and culture vitality. Carolyn co-founded a nonprofit, Buffalo Tongue, with her husband, Michael Reiningwolf. Together, they create virtual and augmented reality experiences to advocate for Native American voices, languages, and cultures. Carolyn is currently pursuing her PhD in interdisciplinary studies at the University of British Columbia. She plays a significant role building on the Sanyakola team's work to deliver automatic speech recognition. She aims to use immersive technologies like virtual or augmented reality to support Indigenous language revitalization by making learning more accessible. I welcome Carolyn to introduce herself.
Sure. My name is Carolyn Runningwolf, and I am a citizen of the Abzalika Nation, also known as Crow, located in Montana, but I'm now living and working in the territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, also known as Vancouver. And very grateful to be here and honored to be part of this panel.
Thank you. Candice Loring is passionate about economic development in Indigenous communities, which led her to pursue a degree in business management from the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. Drawing on her extensive experience working in the financial industry, Candice now applies her business expertise as Director, Business Development and Indigenous Community Engagement with Mitacs, UBC Okanagan. She has envisioned and launched a number of projects under the Indigenous Peoples Engagement Strategy at Mitacs, including this Indigenous Pathways call. Candice's greatest accomplishment is raising her two boys, Jonah and Caleb. I invite Candice to introduce herself.
Thank you. Lidlam Cooks to Wachascahal is squeeze Candice, Kentil Hazelton, and Clachach Clahep to Deborah, Nash, Robert, Takasa Seal, Isquasca Sia, Jonah, Nash, Caleb. Hello, good day to you. My name is Candice Loring, and my traditional name is Gwala'am Nicola. Gwala'am was given to me, it's Gitsanamuk, for resourceful, hardworking educator, and Nicola is after my sixth grandfather, Grand Chief Nicola, of which the Nicola Valley and some local rivers and waterways were named after. And in my role at Mitacs, I do have the privilege of working with individuals like Sarah and Caroline to help advance the Indigenous innovation ecosystem within Canada. And I am a proud member of the Gitwangach band from the Gitsan Nation, and it's a joy to be here today. Thank you. And I'm also from the Eagle Clan.
Thank you so much, Candice. I love the resourceful and hardworking. I couldn't imagine a better suited. So we are now going to move on to our Q&A with our speakers. I just wanted to let everyone know that you can post questions or comments in the chat function. We will have an opportunity at the end to address some of these questions, and we look forward to hearing from you in that chat function there. So Natalie is going to start us off with the first question for our speakers.
The first question, could you share a little bit about the Sanyakola project and your respective roles within this work?
Kayla Kessler. So I work for both Northland College and an advocate and language activist in my community. And my role in the research is as research lead. We help guide our researchers. We have 4 interns and who are working directly through the Mitacs, but we also have researchers and a research team that is working for our partner organization, the Sanyakola Foundation.
Yeah, and as was mentioned in the introduction, I'm part of that research team and involved actually in 2 of the projects. So helping out with the automatic speech recognition project that is being led by Sean Sosi, and then deeply involved in my own project, which is creating a pedagogically and culturally appropriate immersive experience. Basically, the goal being that you can put on a virtual reality headset or pull out your augmented reality device and immerse yourself in the land and the culture and the place, and have fun just applying the language and yeah, and learning the language as you move. So that's my project.
And my role in this project is really about supporting the incredible work that is being done. So in my role at Mitacs as a Director of Business Development and Indigenous Community Engagement, we help support collaborative innovation. And it all actually started from a cross-country consultation that Mitacs was doing to really learn about how we can support and work alongside and with Indigenous communities in their innovation and research needs. And our very own Vice President of Strategic Markets, Duncan Phillips, was sitting beside Sarah Child, and that's where the conversation began. And I was introduced to Sarah, and that was over a year ago now. And it's hard to imagine it's been that long, because we went from that first meeting to really building a relationship together and a friendship, and learning and sharing about our unique views as Indigenous people. And for me to be able to support this on the side of a research funding organization, and them not having to explain where they're coming from or why keeping the purity of their Indigenous work was so important in upholding those Indigenous knowledge systems within a colonial framework. So I have the privilege of working with individuals like this and helping navigate the very much rooted in colonial institutions, national funding organizations, and within the academic setting as well, with post-secondary institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. So why is this research important? Why are you doing this work?
I think that Perry said it best when he described our languages as medicine. Our languages truly are medicine that will feed our souls, and they do feed our souls. And my interest in this language is particularly directed at how work in our language and resurgence of our languages can help to support those in our communities who are lost, who are struggling with finding a place in our contemporary society. I believe the answer to help them find their place lies within them refinding their roots and reestablishing a relationship not only with their communities, with themselves, but with the land and sea that they come from. And so that is vital work. It's about reestablishing wellness for our people, and in particular those who are living lives not so well. And our people across the country, across the globe really, are suffering from inequities on every social determinant of health. And another aspect of it is to instill in our youth and our people the understanding that upholding our Indigenous rights to language, upholding our rights to guide and work towards reconciliation lies within them, to stand up for themselves. Our uncle always says, we must persevere and stand together. And that we're carried on the backs of giants who did just that and got us to this place in time, this time of understanding where we know that the revitalization of our languages is key to reconciliation, to the UN Declaration of Rights for Indigenous people, and to reestablishing our right to live our lives well.
There's not much that anybody can add to what Sarah just said. I guess the only thing I would say is that my specific aspects in this larger language reclamation project is trying to use the technology to its optimal, meaning that the technology can help with overcoming certain barriers. And the barriers would be things like, physical and geographic distance, for example, which in the past has always been a big barrier to learning your heritage language, for me as well. But also barriers that might be more internal, like if we're shy to speak our language because we don't want to mispronounce, or like in my language, if you do some tones wrong, you might say something really insulting, and you don't want to do that. So how can you use that technology to just practice in the privacy of your home until you feel secure in your pronunciation and in your language use, that you then feel more comfortable actually speaking it with your elders and with your family and friends. So that's just adding the technology aspect to the really important bigger picture of language is so fundamental to our identity and our health and our well-being.
Thank you. I agree. There's not much to add to that. But when I was listening, I was reflecting on something that an elder once said to me. And it was, how will the ancestors ever understand or hear our prayers if we don't speak the language? And with that connection, always with an eye looking to our past and honoring our ancestors, honoring where we are today in the present and the work that's being done, but also a look to the future, right? To the children, that this language and projects like this are taking something and preserving it for future generations. And that's, I think, what's really incredible about this project, and the ripple effect that it can have, not just within this community, but within other communities, and how this project can be a framework for other communities to help support their Indigenous language revitalization projects. So for me also, though, within the Mitacs context, a project like this is setting precedents. It is a benchmark for what can be done in this space. We challenged so much of the colonial constructs within research by upholding and legitimizing the Indigenous knowledge systems within this project, for it to be truly community-led, community-driven, for and by Indigenous people. Is something incredible. And to see this team and how strong and resilient they were within that, and honoring those knowledge systems, because that's part of honoring our ancestors and honoring the future generations by keeping that connection. And something Sarah and I were talking about recently was that igniting that fire within, as she was talking about, but it is that connection to our culture that can never be severed. It's in our blood memory. It's in who we are as, for me, as a Gitxsan woman. We are people of the Skeena River Mist. My identity is tied to the lakes and rivers and mountains that we're surrounded by. And the language, it doesn't just say, oh, this is a mountain. It explains it. There's a description. There's so much more to it. And that relationship with the land isn't the same in a linear Western context as it would be within a cyclical, sphere intelligent Indigenous context that incorporates so many more levels to it. And that's what this exemplifies. Yes, Elder Perry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to add on to what you're saying, our languages, all languages across Turtle Island, they are our sound. Every creature of creation has their sound. We identify them. The elk will make their sound, the bear, the eagle, all the different animals have their sound. Each of us, have been given a sound from our first mother. It's our mother who teaches us those first words when we come into creation. And so has she done this for us as nations. And so that language is a part of our sound. When we hear someone from another nation speak, we know who they are by the sound, by their language. And that's so important to make sure our connection to creation is sound and good. And as far as technology, I know that always been a bit of a sensitive area, and one of my teachers told me that, you know, the use of books and recordings and things is a tool. It's what you do with that tool. If you use that tool to do good, to preserve, to protect, that's good. If you use that tool as a weapon to hurt or for other things, then yeah, then maybe that tool shouldn't be used. But in the case of languages and the technology that we have today in order to help us preserve, we don't, you know, use technology as 100%. We still speak. We still have that way of doing it the old way, of having conversations and things. But we need those tools too. We need those tools, and they are available. It's like when the axe first came to us. You know, it's a tool. We can adapt. We can use that to live a better life. And so for our languages, we use technology in that same way. It's an important tool in today's context. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Miigwech.
Thank you.
I'd like to add just to what Perry is saying, and it follows up on exactly what Caroline is trying to achieve. That's using those tools in a way that we can support our language, but not just providing the tools, but making sure that those tools honor our traditional cultural ways and ways of knowing in relationship to our communities, the land, the sea, and all of those entities that exist in our lives.
Thank you. Nat?
Thank you for sharing those beautiful words. I love it. So the next question that I have is, how is this research upholding Indigenous knowledge while navigating the Western systems?
We're striving to strike a balance, a balance between the demands of the college, the university, Mitacs, and our Indigenous organization that we work for. And that's a constant battle, if you will, because most of us have been trained in two worlds, our traditional cultural worldview in that world, but also in Western institutions. And so we're constantly having a battle within ourselves even about how do I honor who I am as Kwakwaka'wakw, as Kwaigil in this work that I'm doing. And constantly wanting to readopt and reinfuse and a holistic approach into research that is such a foreign ground for our people is a challenge, is the biggest challenge for each of us as researchers, but also as community members. And I'm going to stop there for now and just hear from Caroline and Candice, and then I'll probably have more to say. But
I think we also answered part of that question just at the end of the last question, because the language learning, it's not just about memorizing vocabulary or learning how to tell kids to sit down and be quiet. It's about living the language in that cultural context and understanding in a deeper way, and having those connections to the land and to the ancestors. And so this project, just because of what we're doing here, is already, intrinsically upholding Indigenous knowledge systems, and it's such a relief might be the wrong word, but just such a great feeling to be able to do this as part of a completely Indigenous team, and having the Indigenous front and center and foundational to everything that we're doing. And so, yeah, just wanted to add that.
If I may just interject there too, is that we have been adamant that our team needs to be all Indigenous. Many of whom are from Kwakwaka'wakw and from our community. We also were adamant that we need to have research assistants who are Kwakwaka'wakw, because the end goal for Sanyakola is to build capacity for language revitalization. And so if our research team can't be drawn in part from Kwakwaka'wakw, then how are we honoring Sanyakola's need and the community's need? We also knew that we needed to draw from people such as Caroline and her husband and Sean, who aren't from our community but are Indigenous. The rarity of people such as them across the globe is pretty high. So to us, it was like this gift was presented to us, this gift of Caroline and Michael and Sean, and we're like, wow, we need to honor this gift. And so it wasn't an easy task to ensure that they could be a part of our team, and to ensure that we honored them at North Island College. Not just we honored their skill, and we honored the dedication that they put towards language revitalization and Indigenous language in particular, but also honored the work that they've done. You know, Sean holds a doctoral degree. Caroline is working towards a doctoral degree, and we wanted to make sure at North Island College that we just didn't hire them without honoring them.
I love that message. I think what's interesting within this space, and there's such a strong push towards decolonization and indigenization within academic institutions, within corporate Canada and all of these spaces. And it's one thing to say that you are inclusive and to welcome Indigenous people into a space, but are you decolonizing that space? Mm-hmm. Are you accepting them into that space in a good way? And when this concept of walking in two worlds that we do. And sometimes part of that and walking in two worlds and to be successful in both of those spaces is we're groomed to be a certain way. And that means carving out pieces of our identity, carving out pieces of who we are, of our Indigenous ways of knowing and being, so that we can be accepted into that space. And we're saying that's no longer acceptable, that we are bringing our whole selves into those spaces, and those spaces need to learn how to accept us and uphold our Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and no longer having to carve out who we are. And there's no need to be able to walk in two worlds and have to have a different way of being. I think of the two-row wampum and that idea of arm in arm, side by side, working together. And this type of work, this is reconciliation in action. Mm-hmm. And it's a journey, though, right? We've worked with the research team on this project, and there were obstacles that we had to overcome, and still obstacles that we still have yet to overcome, but it was a learning experience. And I was so blessed to be gifted with the knowledge imparted on me from this research team to bring that back and to do that work of decolonization within Mitacs, which is now one of our corporate values. And to take such a strong stance, it just shows, again, that ripple effect of the impact that your work is doing, not just in your community, not just in other Indigenous communities, but nationally across Canada.
That's another point that Candice brings up, is that in putting the research project together, we have to decolonize the research process. So, like how do we apply a holistic approach from a local Kwakwaka'wakw perspective? In some ways, that Kwakwaka'wakw perspective has been buried under decades of colonial education and research. So we're searching at the same time as we know some aspects of what it means to apply Kwakwaka'wakw holistic process at the same time as we're searching for what that means. So it's very complex. And one of the first things that we did was we talked about why do I have to do this conflict of interest statement? How can any of my work or any of Caroline's or Michael's or Sean's or entire team be a conflict of interest when truly we're doing this work not for our own name or fame, but for our communities and for the betterment and restoration of wellness for our communities. And so we questioned that to begin with. And fortunately, we had an influence that is creating pathways to change.
Can I add something as well? It's certainly not lost on me as a man to recognize these beautiful Kwakwaka'wakw, these beautiful women who are leading in this initiative, who are leading in this project. I'm sure there's men involved, but that teaching that our languages, our first languages, come from our mother, the earth first, and the responsibility of our moms to sound that first language to our children as they are born, as they enter this physical realm in birth, that you are the first ones to share that language, to identify to them who they are through those through that time when you first have them in your arms. And so this, you know, this project is a part of that reconnection of those languages, and to have, you know, these beautiful women here, these strong women who are leaders in this, to be a part of this project, it's certainly not lost on me. So again, I want to just to make sure that acknowledgement is there for the roles you play. This is not about power and control. This is about the roles that are needed to reconnect our languages to our people. So chimigwech for that.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you so much for that discussion. Candice, we've had so many conversations around the importance of internal processes and constantly speaking to changing those as we move forward, not just projects, but the processes within organizations to support that work. So I really appreciate that discussion. So Candice, could you share the vision behind the Indigenous Pathways call and walk us through an application process and how our team can offer support through the entire process?
Thank you for that question, Patty. I think just to position it too, when I took this role within Mitacs, it was the first Indigenous specific role, and the eagerness from our leadership to welcome me into the organization and to prioritize Indigenous ways of knowing and being was something I'd never felt before. And I was given a platform and the support to be able to do this work. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. But in my heart, I've always worked on behalf of Indigenous people. While I work for Mitacs, obviously the work that I do is for the Indigenous communities. And when we were looking at the underrepresentation of Indigenous projects, whether it was industry partners or academics, I even reframing that, I don't like to use the word underrepresented. I like to use the word historically excluded, because part of that is about creating space, occupying space, and decolonizing those spaces for future Indigenous people to be welcomed into these areas. And I didn't come into this as a researcher. I had no idea what Mitacs was when I first joined. I'm a recovering banker, but in my heart, I had a calling, and I knew that this was the work that I needed to do. And it was actually sitting at the late Dr. Gregory Younging's funeral, who was one of my very first professors in university, where I didn't feel that I belonged. I'm a grade 10 dropout. I was entered into UBC through a bridging program that helps Indigenous students who don't meet the prerequisites get into university. So as a grade 10 dropout, I was suddenly doing university classes and I felt like an imposter. I never felt like I belonged. I didn't feel like that was a space for me, but I learned about blood memory and colonization of the mind and how much racism I had internalized and that carving out of my identity and who I was as an Indigenous woman. And through that, I learned that I am enough and I'm going to occupy these spaces and I'm going to hold my head tall. And I tell this story because that's what we're doing. That is the vision, is that we are creating space for other Indigenous people to walk into and know that they belong and know that they have a place and know that their Indigenous ways of knowing and being, their knowledge systems are just as important and equal, or right up there with Western knowledge systems, that our elders, Elder Perry, that his knowledge is a PhD, that our knowledge keepers need to be held on that same level. And for me, that's my vision. And this is just one step towards that, about creating space, equitable access. This is the most generous offering, the Mitacs Indigenous Pathways in the history of Mitacs. And, and that just shows that level of commitment. But if your community or if you're an academic and you want to learn how to apply for Mitacs programming, reach out to us. We have this incredible team and we do it for the intrinsic reward, right? When I think about this project, that's what makes me smile at the end of my day. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I think about the work that's being done and the impact in communities, and it's a driving force. And I can tell you that all of us here at Mitacs are the same. So just connect with one of us and we'll help you through the process. We have rolling deadlines, non-competitive, with over 97% success rate. So if we can put all of the key stakeholders together within a project, we have a Mitacs project. And it's perfect for Indigenous community engagement as well, because our model is an innovation pool model. So we're not in the business of funding research projects where they're pushing a research agenda on Indigenous communities. Rather, those communities have a need and they're pulling us in, and we're there to help fund and support and the good work that they're doing, like what's happening here with Sarah and Caroline. And for me, it's just an honor to uphold their work. And that's my position in it.
I would just like to add to that and just say Kayla Kessler to Mitacs, to Duncan Phillips, and in particular Candice. You are open to hearing us. You hear us. And so you don't just hear us either. You help to encourage us to push our agenda versus pushing the research agenda of an institutional one. And that to me is a really important aspect of the work of Mitacs.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's an honor every day. I'm grateful for our friendship.
Thank you so much for that. So first up, connecting with the team. Connecting
Absolutely.
with Candice, David, myself. Awesome. Natalie?
Thank you. The next question, how will language revitalization research and innovation impact our communities?
That's out to anyone. I think Sarah was going to start, or Carolyn can as well.
I think you've heard several times that our language is medicine. It's medicine for our souls. It's medicine for our spirit. And I believe that language revitalization done holistically through the lens of Kwakwaka'wakw ways of knowing and being, of Indigenous ways of knowing and being across the country, across the world, will help restore languages in such a way that we can once again live our lives through our language. It will restore our vital knowledges that help us to live our lives well and good in all of our relationships throughout our lives. The revitalization of our languages will help to restore equity on every level of the social determinants of health for Indigenous people that right now live constantly in inequitable Okay, I'm getting all tongue-tied here. I believe also that the only steps towards truly achieving reconciliation in Canada is the revitalization of our languages. There is no truth to reconciliation if there is no language revitalization for Indigenous people across the globe. So revitalization of our languages will help us to reestablish our sovereignty, our wellness, and our connection to the land and sea that we come from. In Kwakwaka'wakw, we say, Nakiola, we are one with the land and the sea. And many of our people live right now with no idea what that means. Many of our children and our youth haven't been connected to the land or been on the land in meaningful ways and able to explore the land through the lens of the language and the Kwakwaka'wakw ways of knowing. How do you establish your true identity if you've never been on the land, never developed a relationship with it? Our elder Pete Mattlepy said many years ago when we were working with language in a partnership with University of Victoria, he stood up and he was just so adamant. His words were so passionate. And he said, how can we be Bakwam without our languages? It means how can we be people without our languages? I think that says it all.
Thank you, Sarah. Carolyn?
Nothing to add. Says it all.
Wonderful. So also looking at the time, and we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. I'm going to ask one last question to the speakers. So I've heard you speaking often about unlocking AI. What does this mean for language revitalization efforts?
I guess I'll take that one. So the thing is that if you're just living your everyday life in English, without knowing it, you're actually using a lot of AI-powered tools. And you don't have that opportunity in your heritage languages. And so if and when, I'm not doubting the if, so when we unlock the AI and the automatic speech recognition for Kwakwaka'wakw, it means that there's so many more opportunities that come with that technological skill set. For example, transcribing audio. It takes forever. It takes a lot of time. And archival audio that is not transcribed also means that you can't actually search that audio for the content. But if you have automatic speech recognition, speech to text, you can have at least a rough draft transcription, which takes, saves a lot of time. And also you can use the API in your home assistants and just practice the language in your everyday life, telling your home assistant to turn on the lights or tell you what time it is, those kind of things, the knowledge that we need to get the ASR to work, the voice AI to work, also would then be able to power, for example, predictive text, so that you could, easily text your friends in the language, and you could have predictive text helping you with what you're texting. Like I said, it's just the everyday things that you're using in English and not even thinking about the fact that there's some AI powering it in the background. And it's not possible to do that for Kwakwaka'wakw yet. but it will be in the future.
Move over, Siri.
There's one other really important piece, and that's that our languages have been taken. A good portion of our languages have been taken, and our elders are upwards of 80 years old, our fluent speakers who see through the lens of Kwakwaka'wakw. But our languages have been well documented, but they now are trapped in these huge storehouses and museums and archives. But that data bank holds within it vital knowledge of our languages and our cultural ways of being, and thank goodness it exists. If we can tap into that resource to help to feed our work with youth and adults in learning the language on the land, that will be a vital resource to our end goal, which is the pursuit to establish holistic language learning, programming, etc., that helps to reestablish wellness. So every piece of the project works hand in hand and together and is vital.
And while you were speaking, I was thinking about what Elder Perry had brought up too, and about using these as tools, right? It really is a tool. And I am reminded of one of my favorite quotes and guiding principles in life from the words of my brother's great grandfather, Chief Dan George. "O God, like the thunderbird of the old, I shall rise again out of the sea. I shall grab the instruments of the white man's success, his education and his tools, and I shall build my race into the proudest segment of your society." And that's part of what it is owning who we are, reclaiming spaces, using Western ways of knowing as part of that Indigenous resurgence. I was going to say we're mobilizing, but we are. There's more Indigenous people pursuing post-secondary educations, and it's, I was in a call this morning and we were talking about the teachings of the potlatch and how everybody has a place within that. And my place is working within Mitacs, and Sarah and her community and the vision she has there, but everybody has a place within that, and like a self-organizing system and the interconnectedness and how everyone's place within that is important. And I think of it like a wheel with spokes, and if one isn't or falls out of alignment, it just doesn't work, right? And so being not only given that space, but not having to carve out who we are or Indigenous ways of knowing and being within those spaces, upholding that knowledge. There's so many aspects to this, moving away from that linear way of seeing things, that this is cyclical, that sphere intelligence is being brought into this, that connection to the ancestors, to people who haven't come to be yet. And it's something special, and it's so new and it's so groundbreaking. And truly this project is on the cutting edge of technology and ways of knowing in this space. So I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I always say it, but it's just been an honor because you welcomed me into this space, and it's and even from the Mitacs side, that it's an honor for our organization to be able to support projects like this.
I wanted to follow up. That was beautiful. Thank you. The word Sanyakola in Kwakwaka'wakw means being creative together. Our elders chose the name for our foundation for some of those very same sentiments. We have spent decades, generations, trying to circumvent the barriers to the work that we know needs to be done. And so the elders said, well, basically for all of our work in language revitalization, for, fighting for a right to have potlatches, to have ceremony celebrating the lives of our children and our youth, all of our work in that has required us to be extremely creative to overcome the white man's barriers. And so they're like, and the same is true for our language work. And so they said, basically, we want to be creative together to continue to do that work to overcome the barriers that the white man puts in place to stall us and stifle us. And so Sanyakola, being creative together, that's what Indigenous people have had to do for generations and will continue to do.
Oh. You guys are getting me so worked up. I want to go block a road or something.
Let's do it.
I might have some family doing it already.
Get those truckers out of the way.
In our language, Perry, we say, "Wigya, oh, just do it."
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Sarah and Candice, for that, and Perry. So looking at the time, and we were going to ask some questions from the chat. So I know David, and I realized did not introduce David. I apologize. He is on our team with Mitacs, and I'm hoping he is still there. I know he was having a little bit of tech issues, or had, so Candice was going to take over some of those questions in his absence if he can't get back on.
Sure. Just acknowledging the time too, that we are at 11:58, but are we okay if we just still take a few questions? I know I'm free. Okay, so I'll go into the Q&A function, and I see many of us today are occupying in urban spaces all across Turtle Island. Many of us are displaced from our ancestral lands, water, languages. So we grow up in many places. If we are lucky, we learn from many nations. We pick up the universal teachings here too. Can the speakers kindly share any advice for individuals with this experience? What we might consider before choosing which language of either of our ancestry or of the place we call home to learn and practice as an act of self-determination? It's a great question. I know, I'm just going to speak to it first, even though I read it out. But it goes back to that carving out pieces of our identity. I left my community when I was 3 years old. My parents separated, and my mom left with 3 girls in the middle of the night. And we had very little. We moved away from my community. I felt disconnected. And on my mother's side, my grandmother went to the Kamloops Indian Residential School and was not a part of my mom's life because of these intergenerational traumas within my family. So I always grew up with this longing in my heart. And it's funny because I have dark skin. I'm high in Indigenous stereotypicality for my appearance. So I walk into spaces and people can tell I'm an Indigenous woman, but I seen myself in a very different light when I was young. And I remember saying to an elder, I want to learn how to be Indigenous. And he laughed at me and he said, Candice, you are. It's in you. And it's so funny because for me, it was in a colonial institution, learning about colonization of the mind and blood memory. Again, Dr. Gregory Younging, and sitting in his class, and he gave me the permission to be okay with those feelings, and that shame that I wasn't, this competitive indigeneity, like I wasn't Indigenous enough to hold my head tall as an Indigenous woman, that shame wasn't mine to carry, that shame was imposed on me through colonial constructs. And it wasn't my fault that my grandmother went to residential school. It wasn't my fault that there was the abuse and trauma in my family, that my mom had to flee in the middle of the night with her kids. Like, that wasn't my shame to carry, and that my indigeneity was within, and it races in my blood, and I can proudly stand tall and say I am a Gitxsan matriarch. I am owning my space and just being. So that's my thoughts.
I'd like to just add to that. So one of our goals is to help to establish a Sanyakola Foundation plan, and responding to the needs of our membership, our people who live in an urban area. I mean, because our people live all over the place, is one of our goals. But also one of the things that we need to do, I believe, as Indigenous people, is spread that message that our Indigenous rights include our rights to learn our languages no matter where we're living. And so reach out to your communities, connect with your communities, connect with the Assembly of First Nations, the Ministry of Education, for Pete's sake, and make demands. We have a right to make demands that our languages be taught to our children wherever they are.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah and Candice. Thank you so much, everyone. There are so many wonderful comments, and some of them were asking if the video would be shared, the recording, and I heard Nikki saying that yes, it would be sent out to participants, and a list of the questions which people were asking for as well. Perry was going to take a moment to do a closing. Before that time, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity, and to come together. What a great conversation. Thank you.
Also,
Perry?
miigwech from myself as well, for being a part of this, being invited into this space. You know, all of this reminds me of those first bundle teachings that we are given, that very first bundle that is passed to us comes to us before we enter the physical realm. We sit with Gajem Nado, the Creator, and the Creator gives us that very first bundle, our name, our colors, our clan, our family, and our language. And sometimes when we come through that door and we enter the physical realm, we're not given those names and languages and things right away. We look for them. Sometimes we're given them as we grow up, but sometimes we are not. But we look for them later on in life. And this is about reclaiming that part of our bundle, making sure it's available for those who are entering the physical realm as babies, and for those who have entered already and are looking for ways to reclaim that part of their bundle, that language of who they are. So, you know, all of this reminds me of that. It reminds me of a lot of things. And so I just want to say miigwech for being a part of this. I sounded the drum 4 times as we began, to let those spirits know that we were starting, and they entered through this fire to come and be a part of all of this. And I'm going to sound the drum 4 times to conclude things, to let them know it's time for them to go back. Because when we open that door and we invite them in, we need to let them know that it's time to go as well. So miigwech, sound the drum, and we'll be done. Oh, we're good. Mama.